So last time we talked about racial population naturalism and problems with it. I said at the end of last time that this time we would talk about racial constructionism. We're actually going to leave that for the next segment, and in this segment we're going to talk about radical skepticism, the view that races don't exist. And here is where discussion of reference looms largest. Here is where Mallon focuses some of his attention. He wants to counter an argument that Kwame Anthony Apaye has offered against the view that so Kwame Anthony Apaye has argued that races don't exist, and Mallon wants to say that Apaye's methodology that he deploys in making that argument isn't great because we can't know relevant facts about reference, and Apaye relies on our ability to know relevant facts about reference. We're not so concerned with Mallon's dialectic. I used his paper because he nicely unpacks Apaye's argument. We're more interested in Apaye's argument. Okay, so radical skepticism about race holds that races don't exist. So if you say something like, that person's a member of one race group and that person's a member of another race group, you've said something that it doesn't even have the potential to be true. Just like if I say that is a winged horse and that is a unicorn, I haven't said something that can potentially be true because winged horse doesn't have an actual referent and unicorn doesn't have an actual referent. At least that's the idea. So here's Apaye's argument. Premise one, there aren't any biobehavioral essences. This is his language, Mallon uses that language, but basically the idea here is that there aren't any relevant hidden structures, and therefore racialism is false. The description associated with race, that is the sense of the term race, what any competent speaker would unpack by reflecting on the meaning of her term race and her particular race terms, implies racialism. It implies that there are hidden structures. So the idea here is something like this. Assume we adopt a Fregean view of the semantics of natural kind terms, and assume that terms like the black race and the white race are supposed to be natural kind terms. Then we have to identify, according to the Fregean, the description that any competent user will associate with the phrase the black race, and any competent user will associate with the phrase the white race. And what Apaye is saying here is when you actually look at these descriptions and unpack them, you're going to realize they're committed to hidden structures. But by premise one, there are no hidden structures. So if Frege is right about the way reference works for race terms, then there are no races. That is, if the Fregean view of natural kind terms applies to race terms, then it follows that race terms are empty, they don't refer to anything, and therefore it follows that there are no races. Notice we're drawing a metaphysical conclusion from a semantic conclusion in a rather natural way. Just like if the term Pegasus refers to only winged horses, and there are no winged horses, it follows that Pegasus doesn't exist. If the word, say, the white race refers to only a certain hidden structure, and there is no relevant hidden structure, then the white race doesn't exist. Next part of the argument. There's nothing unified at the beginning of the causal chain that led to our acquisition of race talk. So remember that when we looked at a Phrygian view of names, a Kripkean view of names, the Kripkean view holds that my name, Albert Einstein, refers to the individual at the beginning of the causal chain that led to my acquisition of the term Albert Einstein. Now there's some further conditions that need to be met, but that's the basic idea. Someone in the distant past pointed at a little baby and said, I name you Albert Einstein, and then someone heard that use of the term Albert Einstein, and it's been passed on from link to link until it gets to me. So when I acquired the term, I intended to use it the way the person from whom I acquired it uses it. So when I say Albert Einstein, it refers back to that little baby who was dubbed Albert Einstein or the individual that he has since become. That's the causal view of names. Well, you can have a causal view of natural kind terms, in which case a natural kind term would refer to whatever is at the beginning of the causal chain that led to our acquisition of that natural kind term. And here's Apaye's idea. There's nothing interesting at the beginning of the causal chain that led to our acquisition of race talk. This would be as if, remember last time, not in the last segment here, but in the last sequence of videos, we talked about Putnam's concern that maybe there's no hidden structure for water. What would water then refer to? Well, he says if there's two hidden structures, then it refers to the disjunction. If there's none, then it refers to the relevant description, where the description has to be kind of a rich and interesting thing. Apaye is saying here, there's just nothing. There's no hidden structure. There's no isolated breeding population that our race terms are tracking. There's just nothing out there that they're tracking. So if Kripke's right about the way that race terms work, that is, if Kripke's view about natural kind terms applies to race terms, then it follows that there are no races. Well, the next premise just says either Frege or Kripke is right, and I put the question mark there because you might wonder why someone would think that. And it follows that there are no races. So this is basically how Apaye's argument works according to Malin. Now, you might say, look, I reject the claim that either Frege or Kripke is right. But notice that you'd have to offer an alternative, and the alternative would have to be relevantly different. That is, it can't be an adjustment of Frege's theory or an adjustment of Kripke's theory or a hybrid of the two, because any adjustment of either or hybrid of the two is going to produce the same result, presumably. So what would a new theory look like, a new theory of the reference for race terms? Well, one possibility is that we should choose the definitions. I mentioned this last time. That is, that we're free to choose whatever definitions for race terms we like, and we should choose ones that are, if you're Carnap, sort of most fruitful for future theorizing, if you're Haslinger, are most useful for achieving certain political goals. But the point here is we don't unpack pre-existing meanings as Frege and Kripke thought, but instead we sort of invent new ones. We assign new ones in any way we want. If you have that kind of view, then you'll be able to reject 6, and you might not end up with a kind of radical skepticism. Okay, we're going to end this segment there. Next, I should notice, let me just first note this, that racial constructivists will typically deny the premise 6 there, as I was just describing. Instead, they'll say that reference of race terms is fixed by our social practices surrounding ordinary uses of those terms if it's fixed by something independent of us, independent of just stipulation, or it's fixed by stipulation. So it's not some description people hold in their heads or a causal relation to a hidden structure or isolated population that fixes the reference of race terms. Instead, what fixes the reference of race terms is either our social practices or stipulation. Okay, and there we really will end this segment. And next time we're going to go on and talk about racial constructionism.